Hello, welcome to the cloud-based Accounts Payable product demonstration. Today we're going to be looking at Accounts Payable. It's one of several integrated applications we have in the cloud, one being the General Ledger, Accounts Payable, Utility Billing, and also we're integrated in with ADP's Payroll. So let's take a look at Accounts Payable. That's going to be one of the financial modules. I'm going to go ahead and select Accounts Payable. I have already logged into a secure database. It's like all the other cloud products. You can get to your database from any internet browser. So it's true cloud-based. You don't need special software. It is delivered as software as a service. So you have a monthly payment, but that includes use, storage, and support, all the updates, and we back up the software for you. So it is an easy solution to implement. Just like all the other applications, if you look at the toolbar, you're going to see where you're going to be maintaining your vendors, information on your bank accounts. We're going to look at where you can process invoices and credit memos. We're going to look at the check processing and how you go through those steps, and then the reports that are available. The first thing I thought we would do today is let's take a look at all the information that you can track on your vendors. Lots of ways to look up the vendor. Do you know part of the name? You can even have different statuses, active, inactive. You can have different types of vendors. So it's very easy to look those up. I'm going to go ahead and search the database. And as I mentioned, if I knew part of the name, I could get to that information. Let's take a look at Alpine Office. So I'm going to modify this record just to show you the different information that you can track on your vendors. First of all, as we talked about, there's different statuses. So if you've got those guys you don't use, you can still look up their information. We do track different addresses, a pay to and an order from address. Down here at the bottom, you're going to set up the terms so that it will default, when it's due. This is a great feature. You can have an attachment at the vendor level. So for instance, this vendor might have a special contract or a price list. It's as easy as doing an attachment in email, and you just attach any electronic file. An example might be a PDF, a picture. So any electronic file you can attach an email, you can attach to your database. You can even set up direct EFT information on this vendor. For instance, you can store their direct deposit information. We use the Assist Financials, and when I do an expense report, I'm set up as a vendor, and I'll get an email from accounting when that's paid, and I'll know it's in my account the next day. We're not having to print the check, so it is tightly integrated, and you can select on a vendor by vendor basis if you want to pay them electronically. For those in the U.S., if you do 1099s, this is where you store that information. I'm going to show you how when you're paying an invoice, you can deselect if a vendor has, let's say, equipment and services on the same invoice. Over here on the right-hand side, these are all user-definable. So they're, you've got some user-definable amounts, dates. You've also can define these tabs. And once again, you can even set up for this one vendor, always hit this default expense account. So you might have those scenarios. Let's say, for instance, I want to look at purchases to Alpine Office Supply. I can see here on the list all the purchases that I've made. The system does keep unlimited history. If I want to select and look at one, I just hit select. So this takes me to the actual invoice where I've entered in the information. I can see a description, I can see the status, I can see the accounting, and if I've attached that attachment as I've paid that invoice, I can even see the actual invoice right here. So a lot of good information right here just by looking up the particular vendor. Now, other things you might want to do, I might want to look and see if I've made any payments to this vendor. I just hit payments, and I can see here on the left-hand side all the checks, the dates, and the amounts. On the right-hand side is the invoice or maybe invoices that it's paid. So if I want to select, I can see the detail like we did before, the status, the accounting, the attachments. I can even reprint that information right here or reprint that check. In addition, all of these columns are searchable. So maybe you're looking for, it's one of those vendors, you've got a lot of checks, and you can enter in a dollar amount and get to that dollar amount, or maybe a date or a check number. So all of them have searches on the column, so it's really quick and easy to get to the information. So this is where you're maintaining information on your vendors. You can set up multiple bank accounts if you need that capability. What I thought we would do next is let's take a look at where you would enter in your invoices. We've got a couple of different ways to do that. One is you might just enter in, an invoice. I might want to look at one that I've entered in before I post it. A couple of really nice features here. One is if you're trying to pay the same invoice to the same vendor, we're not going to let you do that. We know you've already paid that. You can also, down below on my example, the invoice amount is $100. You've got to completely distribute that. So you could very easily have this one transaction going to 20 or 30 different accounts. The rule is you've got to completely distribute it. You can also set up in the tables, do you want a warning if you're over your budget? So that capability's here. Now if this vendor happens to be one of those guys that are being electronically paid, it's going to check this box. You can also do transactions for vendors that automatically deduct it out of your account. It's going to record the transaction but not print a paper check. Now this is a really nice feature, separate check. You can decide on an invoice by invoice basis if this needs to be a separate check. Even though I may already have 2 invoices in the queue, this one would be separate if I mark separate check. Now I was mentioning earlier on the 1099s, if this vendor is eligible, it's going to check the box. However, you might have a situation where one of the line items shouldn't go into that total. You can unselect it. So very easy to process. Though this would be an example of one that you enter in. We also understand you've got lots of vendors that you pay all the time. You might want to set up a recurring transaction, and all you're going to do is pick which one do you want to pay. Let's say I want to pay this uniform. In this example, I'm going to enter in the dollar amount. It's going to bring up a calendar. I'm going to do today's date. It's going to default the post period. I can override that. And then down below, I'm going to enter in a dollar amount. So I've got this guy set up to go to, it's going to create that transaction. It was going to one account. You can also have recurring transactions be by percentage. So if I'm paying the phone bill and it needs to come out of, 4 different accounts, it'll do the allocation by percentage. One thing to keep in mind though, when I am paying these invoices, I do have the ability, so if I'm paying that phone bill and it needs to come out of multiple funds, I can set it up so that vendor gets one check. The system does all the accounting, so you don't have to send that vendor 4 checks for 4 different funds. I can do one check and let the database keep track of what fund paid for what. So it's designed for true fund accounting. Everything you do on the payable side will update the general ledger, so they are tightly integrated. So that's the process. Very simple to get your invoices entered in. You might want to look at what you've entered in before you post it. So I can even look it up by status. I can see invoices that are already posted, or I can see things that are unposted and see how I've entered that information into the database. So really easy to review things before you post, but you can still look at things after you post. Now, a couple of other things that you might do here. You might want to print a purchase journal, and once again I can do it by status. I can look at open and closed. I could do it for any date range, yes or no for credit memos, and how do I want to sort this? So I'm just going to go ahead and press OK, and I can see all the purchases that I've entered in for that particular point in time. So very easy process. You just go right down the list. Now one thing I want to point out, if you have a question, you can log a support call right in the software. You can call us. You can also chat. We have a support chat queue, so if you've got a quick question, you can get a quick answer. And that's true for all the applications. So now let's take a look at the actual process to create your checks. One thing that you might want to do is, I've got a cash requirements report. I might want to run this report through a certain date to see how much money I need to have in all my funds before I do this check run. And if you notice down here at the bottom, it is going to create a PDF, and I can do it for a specific fund or a range of funds. So I've got this information to know what I need to have before I do that check run. Now, let's go ahead. I haven't turned on the option here to do invoice approval. You can set that up so that you can actually approve the invoice before you go down to the check processing. So that's an option that you can turn on by the user ID. Let's go to check processing. Now, one thing that I might do, I probably have a council meeting, so I might want to run this report before I actually print the checks. So this would be a report that I would take to the council, and a couple of questions. How do you want to sort it out? It's going to sort it based on your account structure. You might want to see it by fund or department and through a date. I'm going to go ahead and say, let's sort it by fund. And so I'm just going to run this report for the council meeting. It's going to sort by fund. I've got a nice report of all the invoices that have been entered in. What are we paying for? What account is it coming out of? And I've even got a budget comparison. So hopefully this report you'll be able to answer all the questions before you do your check run. So if everything's good, you can still come back here and you can modify that. Let's say the council says there's a couple that we don't want to pay, so you can unselect those before you go down to the option to print your checks. So once again, when you post, that's when we're going to update the system. And you've also got these reports here at any point, you know, your cash requirements, or you may want to get a report by fund of all the checks you've issued. And so I can very quickly pull that out. So I've got historical information. As long as I've used the system, I'm being able to pull that information out of the database. So like I said, very easy to go through the check processing. I can look at payment history right here, and I can run this report, you know, by bank account, and very quickly get a list of, you know, all the checks that I've issued. And I can even print my register from here, and lots of ways to do this. I can do it for a range of check dates. I can do it by vendor. I can do it by status. And this is a really nice feature here. I can do it in detail, and I may want to sort it out by my account structure. So really easy to pull this information out. I can even select computer checks, handwritten checks, or e-checks. So lots of ways to pull that check register out of the database. So that's the step there. Now also these reports, we've got an aging report that you can run, and you can decide, you know, how do you want to see this, but you're going to know, you know, by 30, 60, 90, and over 90, you know, what bills you've got out there to pay. You can also run this report at any point if you want to see what's still open, and obviously the 1099 process. So those are the different reports. Setup. You're going to want to decide, do you want a budget warning if you're over budget when you pay that, or do you want it to stop you? Do you want it to interface to the general ledger? 99% say yes. Do you want to turn on invoice approval levels? And this is also where you can set up miscellaneous vendors, your user definable fields. You know, we talked about the vendor types, so you can group certain types of vendors. I think I've got payroll vendors and then other. And this is where you set up those recurring transactions. You know, we talked about paying those bills that you pay every single month. You can decide, is it a flat dollar amount? Is it a percentage? What type of vendor are they? So very easy process. As I mentioned, just like with all the other applications, we do have a service called Go Live that together with you, we get your table set up. We teach you the complete process. So we're there with you until you're live. It's one flat dollar amount, so you don't have to go back to the council to get you know, more training money. So we're there with you on setting up until you go live. And like I said before, this is a software as a service. You pay a monthly fee, and it includes using the software, storage, support, all the updates. We're backing it up for you, and there's no long-term contracts. So thank you for listening into the product demonstration.